Thanks for coming by, and thanks for the iCAN people, Saul, everybody, the Eden Labs folks, the Daga couple. I've always really dug South Africa. I worked on a bunch of documentaries. I got to follow Nelson Mandela around the United States in 1999. Been trying to come here for years, and I met the Daga couple last year in Vienna at the UN conference, the drug conference, where they didn't reschedule cannabis. And I wrote an article about that conference, and then an article about the Daga couple, and then this one, which is in the May 2019 High Times, which you can find on my Muck Rack page, which is at the end. So basically, here is, I have a lot of experience, as he said, going around the country. I would specialize in the teaching seminars in states that were just about to legalize, like New Hampshire, Nevada, Florida, Massachusetts. And I would advise the people who would pay money to come to these seminars, you have to write the laws. If they write the laws, you'll end up getting, in a world of hurt. So just a little bit more about my background. I've always been into human rights, drug war stuff. The Ku Klux Klan article is my first article I ever wrote in high school, where I went to a Ku Klux Klan rally. Then in 1992, I did my first article for High Times about the Rio Earth Summit, where I met some hemp activists from California, and they weren't registered at the conference. They stole a table from the hotel across the street, brought it across to Flamenco Park, and they were giving out hemp ribbons and hemp string to anyone who came in. And since then, I've just continued to write for all these magazines. The guy from Hemp Industries Association, he mentioned how in the former Soviet Union and Chernobyl, they were planting hemp to clean the soil from radioactivity. I thought it was really interesting that he was saying that the seeds, when you do that, are radioactive free, but the stalks and stems are. But I wrote an article about just that in 1994, about how Kazakhstan was cleaning out the soil of nuclear testing sites with hemp way back when. Let's see, click. Here's a little bit more about background. Here's just a bunch of old articles, mainly from the 90s, basically covering human rights and how the drug war is used internationally to lock up indigenous people, sell cocaine to black people in America. America especially has a long history with using the drug war to further its aims. So that's kind of been my specialty, and lately it's been more just about cannabis. I put this article large, this one with the veteran that I did about 4 or 5 years ago for Cannabis Now on there, because a lot of people, when they're forming coalitions for changing and making laws, they're ignoring people that they don't normally hang out with. So maybe hippies don't hang out with soldiers very much, but if they were to unify and work with soldiers who are, that's the guy the article's about. He was in Iraq, he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, waking up, looking for his gun, he almost threw his brother out the window, and he was a Mormon and did not smoke cannabis. But then he started talking to this rabbi, he started smoking some cannabis, his PTSD symptoms went down, now he has long hair, and he's, so anyway, that's just an example of how to get it. And also, just briefly, when I lived in New York in 1999, I helped found the New York Medical Marijuana Patients Cooperative, which was long before the new medical marijuana law they have now in New York, which is yet another example of botanical apartheid, where they're only allowing certain conditions. You have to have a certain condition to get access to cannabis in New York. But back then, at least for the borough of Manhattan, our lawyer, who was a black guy with a purple mohawk, met with the DA, Robert Morgenthau of Manhattan, and said, look, we have a lot of sick people, they need cannabis, we're renting out the space twice a week for a few hours, and we're gonna sell cannabis to people. We have a nurse on site, and we're gonna have these little cards. And we made these little cards, and the district attorney faxed them to every police precinct in Manhattan, and all the cops said if they saw these cards, let the people go. And hundreds of people eventually got let go and didn't have to go to jail for smoking a joint in the street or getting caught with cannabis. So it just kind of shows that that's another point of the strategy when you're trying to change your your local laws. I mean, South Africa is a little more federalized. Like it seems like if it's legal here in the whole country, it's not like the United States where every state and city is its own little fiefdom, and you have to grease different wheels. You have to grease a different district attorney, a different mayor. The political climate is so diverse and balkanized there that you really have to kind of work your local angles. Now, one funny bit about the New York Medical Marijuana Patients Cooperative is my good friend Danny Danko from High Times, the cultivation editor. He donated a bunch of White Widow shake to us, and the nurse made 50 cookies, which the cops, someone came in and bought an ounce from us and then was selling it across the street in Tompkins Square Park. And they're like, "Where'd you get it?" "I bought it right across the street." So those cops came and they raided us while things were open. And they found the cookies, and they didn't think they could get tested for THC if they ate the cookies. So they're giggling, and there's sworn affidavits from people who saw them. They're taking the cookies and putting them into individual brown paper bags. And we said they took 48 cookies, but the cops said they only took 16. And my friend who was in the jail watching the cops that night, because you go to the precinct, you're in this little jail like on a TV show, and the cops are on the other side. They ate these cookies and were getting all this takeout food. Their eyes are all glossy. And our lawyer said, look, they ate the cookies. So that got out in the press. So that was how our case got dropped. But that's the purgatory of, it's funny, but for the guy who ran the club, that was 18 months of potentially going to jail, like the Dogger couple is dealing with now. They have this court thing hanging over their head. And that just really debilitates your life. It's something you gotta wake up with every day. It's a human rights violation to get in your head like that. So I remember being in court, and the district attorney was always, or assistant district attorney, was always very disorganized. He was like, I just got this out of fax. We're gonna have a motion to dismiss. And the judge was like, on what grounds? And he's like, there's been media attention because they were writing, the NYPD has a new favorite pastry instead of donuts, these hot cookies. And he's like, I can't dismiss based on media attention. So I don't remember what the grounds were. Anyway, that's a little background. I put this article up, creating a pot investment portfolio, because I used to write a stock market column about marijuana pot stocks, and I think that the goal of a lot of the companies here, more power to them, they don't even think they're going to be legitimate until they have an IPO, until they have something on the stock market, because that is the best, most efficient way to expand quickly. Like High Times is doing it now, where they actually just bought a bunch of magazines with not even issued worthless stock. So they say we'll give you $1 million plus 10 million in stock. And so, or the deal's made in stock that's worth $1 one day and then it's worth 2 cents the next day. Anyway, that's the basic model of how a lot of these cannabis companies are run. So I always get really leery of any cannabis company who's doing this pump and dump thing and trying to get their version of exploiting botanical apartheid, their CBD whatever company, onto the stock market and getting that money. I'm more about trying to help people who are already in the business, making maybe $500,000 to $100,000 a year, using cannabis selling or growing or processing as kind of a side business, a tax-free side business in the privacy of their own homes with their friends and the people that they work with. So basically from 1996, there's Proposition 215 happened, the Compassionate Care Act that Dennis Perone came up with. I have a very short amount of time. And the point of that was, it was a medical marijuana bill, but he wanted access and loopholes to be created so that you could have a medical marijuana store that wasn't a store. You have to be a member of it. You have to get a doctor to write a recommendation, not a prescription. Then you're in, and you can sell cannabis there, you can sell extracts. Every private club was doing its own thing, and the municipalities governed it. Some cities dug it, some didn't. Counties, there's 58 counties in California, some counties banned them completely. But now, fast forward to 2016, and we have Proposition 64, which has legalized cannabis, which has been an absolute nightmare, because they've created this over-bloated bureaucracy with 47 different kinds of licenses. You need a T7 for using butane, a T something else if you use CO2. You need a grow license, an indoor grow license, an outdoor grow license, and they don't have anywhere near the amount of inspectors who can actually go and do this. So the new move is when the inspector does come, you just don't open the door. And then maybe he comes back later. And so then you stay in business by ignoring the inspectors as much as possible, because if you engage with them, then you're engaging with incompetence. And you basically, when you first get a permit, you have 120 days to get inspected. So then you can get an annual license and you have to get inspected again, which is impossible. There's 9,900 cannabis licenses and a very small amount of inspectors. Here's some other problems with the 64 law. There's giant contradictions between state and local laws. You'll have a municipality that says, yeah, you can set up this grow, but then the county says no, and that's different from the state law. So a lot of people lose their shirts that way. Seed to sale, the whole technology of seed to sale, that's basically a big, stupid nightmare in Washington state. The company that was subcontracted by the Cannabis Control Bureau, which was fused with the alcohol regulatory agency, they basically hacked themselves so that there was a denial of service, so that nobody could get their reports for seed to sale in on Friday. And then they said, well, you can upgrade and get this backup service separate and pay more. And it kind of got exposed that they had done that, but yet the Cannabis Control Bureau hired that software company again to do it again. Because the whole idea of having to grow a plant from seed all the way to sale and track every single gram of waste cannabis it's ridiculous. Maybe that would work in some medical thing, but we want to keep this for private clubs, which is why I highly suggest checking out this private clubs initiative, which is in this document, which any of you major cannabis capitalists, I would please support organizations like that, or maybe take 30% of your, like Nelson Mandela did with his children's fund, of your income and put it into social service and social justice organizations who will actually help make your life easier. Now, in terms of Casanomics, we talked about earlier, the whole thriving festival scene provides a good infrastructure already for these hubs that are in the Fields of Green document, and these hubs can be, they can be mobile, where you have a guy pressing rosin, you have someone else extracting, and in this first, as I have 30 seconds left, I would just implore people to kind of slow down on the regulations, and instead of trying to get everything set, let's just repair the damage first, like the damaged lands from the glyphosate, all the people that have been locked up. Let's try and get them trained and educated and back into the cannabis, use their knowledge, and let these private clubs develop as they want to. This is just one guy's farm. Just gonna blast, time's up. And I'm just gonna say real quick, if I can just steal one more minute. Cannabis packaging stinks. That's 1 gram for, these are the ratios of waste per gram. If you have a private club, have people bring their own to containers for a discount. And the last thing, the most important thing I think in terms of promoting botanical literacy is use existing infrastructures like schools and universities to grow, extract. Instead of having a hub where they have to buy testing equipment, just buy the testing equipment and put it in a university and have them be experimenting and looking after cannabis and other plants. And like the guy from Hemp Industry Association said, you can, by increasing this botanical literacy, you can not just be testing pot, you can be testing all plants. And then it becomes normal, you can, and there's all testing and growing done in schools, elementary schools, high schools, colleges in 20, 30 years or so. The idea that terpenes are in plants and they help people will become normal enough to make some kind of sane cannabis regulation. Because we're all too traumatized. We've been living in insane prohibition and this botanical apartheid for way too long. So let's just let the younger people learn how to grow and extract and make their own medicine and food, and then let them come up with some kind of regulatory system. But for now, we know we can at least get rid of some of the stupid laws that they have now. Okay, I gotta go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, John Veit. Appreciate it, sir. We've got